Every George Gershwin or Rodgers and Hart song is a standard, a piece of American soul stitched into melody. But behind every note, every harmony, lies a hidden rhythm, one you don't hear on the radio. It's the rhythm of silence, of backstage tension, broken promises, and unspoken betrayals. Now imagine this. It's 1979, backstage at the legendary Troubadour in Los Angeles, a sacred space for rising stars and fading icons alike. The air buzzes with the electricity of pre-show nerves. Guitars shriek through amps in soundcheck. Glasses clink. Roadies shout over tangled wires. The smell of sweat and hairspray fills the narrow halls. Then, suddenly, everything stops. A young assistant barges into the promoter's office, pale-faced and breathless. "She's gone," he says. No questions, no arguments, just a look at the lineup, and Linda Ronstadt walked out without a word. What could have made the queen of rock and country vanish like a ghost? It wasn't the crowd, it wasn't the venue, it was one name, a single name printed on the performance list, a ghost from her past. And with that, Linda left behind more than just a green room. She left behind years of quiet, poised dignity. And now, decades later, that silence is breaking. In this rare and raw exposé, Linda Ronstadt opens the door to a locked room in her past. These are the 9 artists she never forgave. Men who bruised her pride, manipulated her kindness, and revealed the darker side of the music business. These aren't petty feuds or diva tantrums. They're deeper. Wounds hidden behind polite smiles and platinum records. Don Henley, the quiet drummer who outgrew his gratitude. Before he became the voice of Hotel California, Don Henley was simply the guy behind Linda's drum kit. In the early 70s, Ronstadt wasn't just a rising star, she was a rocket ship. Her shows were packed, her albums sold fast, and she had a reputation for spotting raw talent. Henley was just that. She gave him his start, a seat in her band, and the stage light he'd never forget. But success changes people. By 1975, the Eagles had soared. Henley was no longer the backup drummer, he was a headline act. At a show backstage at the Universal Amphitheater, he reportedly laughed at Linda and said she should stick to cover songs and let real artists write music. It wasn't just arrogant, it was a slap to everything she'd fought for. Every lyric, every tour, every ounce of artistry. That night she revoked his tour pass. Not out of spite, but out of principle. Whispers in the industry told of Henley's growing ego, his backstage tantrums fueled by excess, and his disregard for the people who helped him. Linda later called him a climber. Brilliant, but someone who lost his soul chasing stardom. The betrayal wasn't in his success, it was in his amnesia. He forgot who believed in him first. Jim Morrison, the drunken prince who turned a moment into a circus. The Sunset Strip in the late 60s was a powder keg of sound and sin, and in the midst of it was Linda, young, talented, and working twice as hard to earn half the respect. One night in 1968, at a private after-party near Whiskey A Go-Go, her path collided with rock's most unpredictable wildcard, Jim Morrison. Already tipsy, shirt half open, Morrison spotted her in the crowd and did something no one expected. He pulled her on stage. No warning, no cue, just ego and impulse. He leaned in for a kiss. She pulled away. He stumbled, knocked over her mic stand, and nearly brought down the whole rig. The room froze. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't spontaneous. It was humiliating. The moment wasn't filmed, but it echoed for years in whispers and radio interviews. Morrison later doubled down, calling her sweet but spineless on air. He branded her as forgettable. Linda never responded publicly, but in private she described him as a clever wreck, a man who weaponized charm and chaos. His kiss was never the wound. It was the message, that women in rock were props, not peers, and Linda refused to play that part. Neil Young. When protest turned to personal rejection, a benefit concert for farm workers brought together the heavyweights of protest music, Neil Young, Linda Ronstadt, and others who had used their voices for more than just melodies. It should have been a moment of unity. Instead, it tore open Linda's ideals. Backstage, she offered ideas for the set list, songs rooted in message and melody. Neil rejected them all. He called her sound too commercial, cold, manufactured. Later, he told reporters she wasn't made for protest music. She left the venue in tears. This wasn't a critique, it was a character assassination. Linda, who had risked alienating fans and industry execs by supporting the cause, had just been discredited by one of its icons. She told friends it felt like being called hollow by someone you once thought had heart. After that night, they never shared a stage again. Frank Zappa, the genius who turned cruel. Frank Zappa was the mad scientist of rock. Wild, brilliant, impossible to predict. Linda admired him, wanted to record one of his songs. It should have been magic. Instead, it became humiliation. The session fell apart almost instantly. Zappa dismissed her tone as too clean. He said she was watering down real music. Mid-rehearsal, he stopped the band, smirked, and said, "This is what happens when you give a pop singer real music." She didn't fight. She packed her things. She never returned. In private, she said he was clever but cruel. She respected his mind, but not his heart. David Crosby, when a Canyon brother turned into a stranger. In Laurel Canyon, they were like siblings. Crosby's harmonies, Linda's powerful voice, they defined a generation. But one day in 1978, during a recording session, Linda asked for a simple key change. Crosby refused. "You should learn to adapt," he said. It turned ugly fast. The studio was buzzing with tension. Days later, Crosby told Rolling Stone she was manufactured, a blow that cut deeper than gossip. It was public dismissal from a friend. After that, his name was banned in her circle. His songs scrubbed from her set list. She saw him as proof that drugs, ego, and fame could hollow out even the most talented souls. Elvis Costello, the punk who took a cheap shot. By 1979, Linda Ronstadt had already conquered radio. She wasn't just performing, she was dominating. And then came Cleveland, a multi-genre festival that brought rock, punk, and pop together for one unforgettable night. Elvis Costello, riding the early wave of his punk new wave fame, was among the newer faces at the event. Sharp-tongued, high-minded, and always ready to stir the pot. He watched Linda perform from the wings that night and made sure everyone knew what he thought afterward. He told reporters her set was background music for brunch. The quote spread like wildfire. Backstage, Linda approached him, not for drama, but for clarity. Maybe a chance to talk artist to artist. But instead, Costello, allegedly drunk, looked her in the eye, insulted her again, and walked off laughing. She said nothing to the press, no outrage, no rebuttal. But later she would say that Costello wasn't just mean, he represented a new kind of cruelty in music, the weaponization of irony, a generation of artists who used intelligence as a blade, not a bridge. She once told a friend, he wasn't rebellious, he was just arrogant. Paul Simon, the perfectionist who made her feel small. It was supposed to be legendary, a duet between Paul Simon, half of one of the most beloved songwriting duos in American history, and Linda Ronstadt, the most versatile voice of her time. Instead, it was a quiet war. From the very first studio session in 1982, Linda knew something was off. Simon nitpicked her phrasing, paused recordings for tiny flaws, rewrote lyrics without discussion. She told close friends it felt like being lectured by a principal. Every note she sang was measured, corrected, and questioned. It wasn't collaboration, it was condescension. The track was never released, never even finished. The sessions were buried under layers of discomfort and creative tension. Linda walked away with more than a bruised ego. She walked away with a vow, never again. In later years, she described Simon as brilliant but deeply controlling. She wasn't afraid of critique, but she couldn't stand being made to feel less than an equal. Stevie Nicks, the sisterhood that fractured on stage. There was a time when Linda and Stevie Nicks were the embodiment of female power in rock. Their voices, one silky, one smoky, complemented each other like dusk and dawn. Fans dreamed of tours, albums, duets, and for a while that dream looked real. In 1981, they embarked on a short shared tour. Two icons, one stage. But behind the curtains, things began to fracture. Ronstadt, ever the meticulous performer, valued rehearsal, structure, and preparation. Stevie, in her cocaine-fueled prime, was a creature of mood and mystique, often showing up late, occasionally not at all. One night, Linda found herself on the stage solo, performing what was supposed to be a joint encore. Stevie, allegedly backstage in tears and haze, never emerged. The press spun it as artistic differences. Linda never corrected them, but she quietly canceled the remaining shared shows. Years later, in private conversations, she would say Stevie had a voice like no other, but a presence that vanished when it mattered most. She never blamed her, but she never tried again either. Leonard Cohen, the poet who pulled the plug. Perhaps the most shocking name on the list isn't one who insulted her or embarrassed her, but one who simply walked away. Leonard Cohen, the eternal poet of darkness and depth, once approached Linda with the idea of a collaboration in the late 70s. He had written a series of songs he thought her voice could carry into the heavens. The two met, shared sessions, exchanged ideas, and then, just as quickly, he disappeared. Without a word, Cohen canceled the project. No call, no explanation, just silence. Linda was devastated. This wasn't about fame or pride. It was about artistic chemistry she believed in. She told a friend at the time, his silence said more than his songs. The wound wasn't dramatic, but it ran deep. She'd admired him, respected him, and then felt abandoned without warning. Cohen, when asked later, only said it wasn't the right time. For Linda, it was another reminder that in music, even poetry could betray you. For years, Linda Ronstadt never told these stories, not because they lacked weight, but because she believed in letting the music speak louder than ego. But silence, too, has its limit. And now these 9 names, once friends, collaborators, heroes, stand as scars behind the spotlight. This isn't revenge, it's reflection. Because for every soaring note, there was a moment of pain. For every hit record, a night of heartbreak. And for every ovation, a memory that didn't make it to the stage. Linda Ronstadt never needed to shout. She didn't have to. Her voice carried the power of 1,000 truths. But now, finally, she's breaking the quiet. And in doing so, reminding us all that grace isn't weakness, it's survival. Which betrayal struck you the most? Was Linda right to keep quiet all these years? Or should these stories have come sooner? Comment below and let the conversation begin.